One of the best ways to truly make a strong repeating pattern is to create a design where you can't pinpoint where the pattern begins and ends. Utilizing more elements can be helpful, but a surefire way of doing this is to create a pattern using different repeating styles like a half drop pattern repeat. Half drop repeats are a great way to create a professional repeat that flows easily with no apparent lines or seams, aka you can't easily see where the repeat begins and where it ends. This week, I'm coming back with another surface pattern design related tutorial going through my process for creating more complex half drop patterns in the Procreate app. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Creative Studio. If you're new here, hi, I'm Jen, the creative behind the channel. I'm a Latina freelance graphic designer, illustrator, and online educator based out of the Midwest, and I run Bella and Sophia Creative Studio. In addition to the tutorials that you can find on this channel, you can find more creative courses over on my learning platform, learncreatedesign.com. I'm a huge advocate for sharing knowledge in accessible ways, and YouTube and the internet have been great ways for me to do so. As I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, we will be learning how to create complex half-drop patterns in Procreate today. I will go through my process to show how you can set up a reusable Procreate template, create your illustrations, refine and color the illustrations, and then go through how to build your repeating pattern all in the Procreate app. I will also share some helpful tips to keep in mind when trying to build stronger repeating patterns. I'm really looking forward to creating with you today. Let's get started. So before we begin actually setting up our file in Procreate, I want to explain how the half drop versus the basic straight repeat works, because this will help you as we work on setting up the file and you'll be able to better understand it. So I'm just going to open up a blank file that I already had here that has some outlines kind of explaining how this works. So first let's look at our straight repeat. So when we look at the straight repeat, basically what's building our actual seamless repeat is that whatever elements we have at the top of our block is gonna basically repeat at the bottom of the block in the exact same position. Whatever's on the left hand side of the block is gonna repeat exactly in the same space on the right side of the block. And then basically we match these up to build the seamless repeat over and over again. Now with a half drop repeat, it's a little bit different. So when we're looking at how this is built, whatever is up top is going to be at the bottom, just like in our original straight repeat. The only difference is that whatever is in the upper left hand quadrant is going to be in the lower right hand quadrant. So basically we're dropping our square by half the measurement of whatever our original artboard is. So as you see, the top and bottom still match up, but what happens is that we drop the square down, and then whatever was in that original upper left hand of the new square is going to match up with whatever's in the lower right hand of the first square. So this just kind of helps to give you an idea of how this works. And again, so top and bottom matches. The changes are occurring on our left and right hand side of our repeating square, of our tile basically. You can think of these as tiles. So whatever is in this lower, if we were to split this into four sections. So I'm gonna kind of split it in half and split it in half here. Whatever is in this upper left hand quadrant will be in the lower right hand quadrant. Whatever is in the lower left hand quadrant will be in our upper right hand quadrant. So we're dropping the design by half a square, so basically a half drop, which is a half drop repeat. So I just like to kind of lay this out to kind of show the mechanics of how it works in order to better understand the placements as we're working through. So now that we see this, I want to kind of show you this in action. So I'm going to go to a pattern that I already had created, and this is actually the test part. This isn't the tile. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections. So first is that lower left hand quadrant, and then the upper left-hand quadrant, and then on the sides, which is where our drop is happening, you'll see that we have a full square in the center, but then we drop by half with these bottom and top pieces. So half went up and then the other half went down. So you kind of see how, like, basically, I'm gonna show you with the guides. You can see how this drops. So here's the original, whatever is up here matches down on this lower area here. So the drop is happening here. So you're staggering your side pieces here. So your first two match up and down, but then the next ones of the 5 pieces, they're gonna stagger. One's gonna go up, the other one's gonna come towards the middle, and then the other last one will go down. I'm gonna turn off these lines, and then we can go back out into our gallery. So I'm gonna go into my gallery, and then I'm gonna set up a new file here. So I'm gonna select the plus icon in the upper right hand corner, and I'm gonna set up a 2000 by 2000 artboard at 300 dpi. So I already have one set up here, but if you don't, you can just hit this little rectangle with a plus in it. That will allow you to create a custom canvas, and you can just select your width and type in 2000, select your height, type in 2000, update your DPI to 300 if it isn't already. This is the number of layers you'll be able to get, and then you can hit done and then hit create, and it'll create a document in this size. So before we get started on creating and building our repeating pattern, I want to share some helpful tips that will help ensure that you're creating the strongest repeating pattern that you can. First, I would suggest making sure you repeat your elements at the start of designing. It may take a little bit more time initially, but it'll save you time in the long run. You should start by repeating one motif and then gradually add in additional motifs. This will give you better control over your design, and it allows you to make strategic decisions about what to add or remove once you've built out the pattern. I would also suggest placing your elements within the design in a random format, and I would say adjust the size and direction of your motifs. You could change things up by rotating, mirroring, enlarging, or reducing them. Next, I would suggest selecting a repeat size that is large enough to include a variety of elements. The more elements you typically have in the design, the harder it is to see that repeat seam. Next, I would consider joining elements together to help the design flow a bit better, and so that the motifs don't appear as separate elements all by themselves. Then, I would think about both the positive and the negative space in your design. The negative space can be just as powerful as the positive space. You can opt to leave space blank to make a statement, or you can opt to fill in empty space to maximize the space taken up by your design. And finally, I would suggest try using different repeat types. If one isn't working, try something else. Half drop, brick, and random repeats are often easier to disguise your repeat seams with when it comes to creating your surface pattern designs. Now what we're going to do is basically set up our template that can be reused to create this half drop. And then I'm going to update my color wheel to a color, and then I'm going to take that color and drag and drop it into my artboard here, and it's going to fill the whole space. So we're creating the template with the 4 quadrants plus our sides. We're going to have 6 sections total. So once we've color dropped, what we want to do is select our transform tool, which is that arrow tool. And before we move anything, you'll see you have marching ants, kind of like that little transform selection around your square. But before we do anything, what I like to do is turn on snapping. I'm going to turn on magnetics and snapping. Snapping is basically that little like lightning icon in this pop-up on the bottom. And I want to just make sure magnetics and snapping is turned on, and both distance and velocity have been set to the max amount. And then what we're going to do is make sure that uniform is selected, and then we are going to transform this square so that it goes into our first quadrant, which was that upper left hand section. So we're going to take our Apple Pencil or your stylus, whatever you're working with, tap on the corner of your square, and you're going to drag it up until you see a crosshair. You'll see yellow crosshairs, and then you'll see a blue line across. That means that you're exactly at the halfway point of your square. Like it's exactly 1/4. So it's 1000 by 1000 pixels. And then you can see that little pop up there to just double check your measurements, and then you can just release it. Once we've done this, then we can go into our layers panel, and we're going to tap the little image within layer 1, and we're going to select, and it's going to select this section. And then what we want to do is in this lower pop-up, you'll see something called save and load. It looks like a heart icon. We're going to tap on that, and we're going to basically create our selections, which is going to allow us to create our template. So I'm going to click on that little plus icon within the selections pop-up menu, and it's going to give me our first little quadrant that we're working with. Then we're going to tap our selection tool to exit out of this, and we're going to repeat this process. We're going to take our color dropper tool, and then I'm just going to drop it in, and then I'm going to go into my transform tool, which is that arrow, and then I'm going to drag it up to my second quadrant, which is that upper right hand side. I'm going to wait till I see 1000 by 1000 pixels, and I see that double crosshair with the yellow guidelines and then that blue guideline, and then I'm going to release it. I'm going to go into my layers panel. I'm going to tap on that layer again. I'm going to hit select. This bottom pop-up comes up. I'm going to tap on save and load. I'm going to hit the plus, and it's going to give me my second selection. And then I'm just going to hit that selection icon again to release it. Drag in my color dropper again. Select my transform tool. Drag my square to the lower left-hand quadrant. Release it, go into my layers panel, tap on select, go into save and load, and that'll be our third selection. Click on that little select icon to release it. Drag my color dropper again, select the transform tool, bring the square down to my lower right hand corner, release it, go into my layers panel, tap select, and then go into save and load. Hit the plus icon, and now we have our first 4 quadrants. Now we are going to select the selection icons to deselect everything. Then we can clear this. We can just drag our layer to the left, select clear, update our color wheel, just so that you know we're working on a different section, because now we're going to be working on our side quadrants. And then select your color, drag and drop, fill it. And this time, instead of resizing, what we're going to do is just drag our object to the left and right. So I'm going to select my transform tool, and then like I said, instead of resizing it, I'm dragging the whole entire square to the left. And what you'll see is you'll get those crosshairs again, so you know you're exactly in the center. Then we can release. So once we've moved our layer to the left, what we'll do is go into our layers option, and then we're going to tap on the image icon, hit select, and then we're going to save and load this as our 5th selection. And then without releasing this, I want you to tap on invert, and then it'll select the other side, and then we'll hit save and load, and we'll tap on the plus icon in our selections. That'll be our 6th selection. Then you can release the selection by tapping on your selection icon, and then you can clear your layer. Now that we have our selections and our transform options all set up, what we'll want to do is begin to create our pattern. So what I've done is created some guides kind of help us as we're working through. So this is the first guide that we're going to utilize, and then this is the second guide. I also suggest creating a new layer group for your pattern. I'm going to select my layers icon here, and I'm going to hit my plus icon 3 times, and then I'm going to select those layers, and then I'm going to group them together, and then I'm going to rename this group by tapping where it says new group, and then you'll get this little pop-up, select rename, and I'm going to change this to pattern tile so that I know that this is my pattern tile. And then I'm going to go into the pattern tile group and select my layers. The very bottom layer will be my background layer. So I'm going to tap where it says layer 4, get this pop-up, select rename, change it to background, select layer 5, which is right above that, rename it, pattern part 2, and then select the next layer above that, tap on where it says layer 6, select rename, and then pattern part 1. We could always add more layers if needed. I just kind of give myself a few to work with. One of the important things is that you have a layer to fill with a background color. You can change this background color in the future, remove it completely altogether, but in order to make the transformations work correctly, we need to make sure that we have a background color. So I'm going to tap on that background layer, and I'm just going to drag and drop it and fill it. Once I've done that, I can begin building my pattern. So I'm going to select pattern part 1, and then I'm going to just do some simple flower artwork. And I'm also going to go into my guides and turn them on. And I'm going to turn on my first one. So when I'm drawing my flowers, I think it'll be important to note that you want to make sure that whatever you draw stays in the center. It doesn't touch any edges. I'm going to go into my recents. I'm going to select the Mercury brush. And that is what I'm going to use to kind of start to build out these flower stems. So keeping in mind, I want everything to kind of stay within the center of this, and I don't want anything to go off the edges. And these don't have to be complicated. They can be really simple. And then once I've added my stems, I'm going to go back through, select a different color, and add in the floral pieces. And then I'm going to go in and update my color and utilize this purple and add some blooms and blossoms. And keep these very simple. I don't want this too complicated. And then I'll go back to the green, add some more stems, play around with connecting elements as well, as we mentioned in the tips, or as I mentioned in the tips. It could be really helpful to kind of like basically connect the different pieces of your design so that elements don't feel like they're off in their own little world here. And then I'll keep adding elements until I feel like everything is filled to my liking in terms of the placement. All right, once I'm done filling up the center to my liking, what we're gonna do now is begin to transform our sections. So we wanna make sure that our pattern tile layer is selected and all the elements are turned on. And then what we're gonna do is with that pattern tile selected, you'll see it highlighted in blue, we can begin our transformations. So we're gonna start with our first set of guides, so 1, 3, and 6. So what we'll do is go into our selection tool, select it, and then we're going to tap on save and load, and we're going to transform the first quadrant here. So we're going to select selection 1, and then you'll see it's highlighted, and then we're going to tap on our transform tool here, which is that arrow, and then we're going to flip it horizontal, and then we're going to flip it vertical. And like I said, basically we're taking everything from the center and we're pulling it to our edges, and then in the second part we'll fill in the middle. So now what we'll want to do is tap on our selection icon to deselect it, make sure that that pattern tile is still selected, tap on the selection again, go into save and load, tap on selection 3, which will be that lower left hand quadrant, tap on our transform tool, and then in the bottom pop-up here, select flip horizontal, flip vertical. And then we're going to repeat that process again. Tap on our selection, go into save and load. This time we want to tap on selection 6, which is this right hand area. And then what we'll want to do is hit our transform tool, and then we're going to flip horizontal and flip vertical. Okay. And now we can go into, I'm going to go into my guides and turn off guide 1 and turn on guide 2. And then if needed, I'm going to go into my opacity options and just bring it down so that I can see what I'm working with. And then we're going to go into our pattern tile, and I'm going to select pattern 2. And basically what we're going to do is add our middle elements to this. And what we'll want to do is go in and basically add more of these same elements just to fill in the center area of this as well. And I like to do it on a separate layer, and just so that I can see what I'm working with, I like to kind of like do this on a separate layer. What we can do also is select pattern part 1 and adjust the opacity so you can see the difference between what was originally created and then what we're adding on top of it. So I'm going to select pattern 2, and then I'm going to go in and fill in these blank areas, making sure I don't cross the edges, and I just fill in key areas here with the additional elements that I'm adding to complete the tile. And because I am wanting this to be a directional print, meaning that all of the elements are going to be going in the same direction, I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to rotate my artboard here so that I'm working in a direction that makes sense. So basically it flipped everything upside down for me, so I'm just going to turn it right side up again. And then I can start adding additional key elements here. All right, once I'm done with that, then we can begin the transformation process once more. So I'm going to go into my pattern part 1. I'm just going to bring up the opacity again. Now that we've filled in our center, we can begin the transformation process once more. This time we want to make sure we are on the second set of guides. And then I'm just going to turn this around so that we can see what we're doing. So I've added in the elements, and now what we can do is go into our layers, make sure the pattern tile is selected, and then what we'll want to do is go into our selection options here, select save and load, and we're going to start with section 5 here. So we're going to tap on save and load, select selection 5, tap on transform, and then we're going to flip it horizontal and flip it vertical. Now we can select to deselect. So now we're going to tap on our selection icon, hit save and load from the pop-up, and then what we'll want to do is tap on selection 2, and then we're going to tap on our transform tool, and then what we'll want to do is flip horizontal, flip vertical, and then hit our selection icon to deselect it, hit that selection icon again, go into save and load, and then we're going to tap on selection 4, and then we're going to hit our transform tool, and then we're going to hit flip horizontal and then flip vertical, and it will finalize this last transformation and our tile is complete. But if there are any elements or anything that you notice, like I'm noticing right here, there's like a nice big blank spot, you can fill that at this time. So I'm going to go into my pattern tile, select pattern 2, and then I'm just going to add in some additional elements to kind of complete this key area here. All right, once I'm done with that, now what we can do is test this tile. So once I've finished adding all of my elements, I'm going to turn my guides off, and then I'm going to take these 2 pattern pieces. So I'm going to flatten these 2, so I'm just going to tap on that first pattern part, and then I'm going to tap on the image, and I'm going to select merge down, and it's going to merge those 2 elements. And then like I said, we can, if you wanted to, we can now like change or remove this background. You can update the color, whatever you'd like to do. I'm just going to keep it as is for now. And then what we'll want to do is make a copy of this whole pattern tile group. And then what I'm going to do is flatten this whole thing so that we can test it. And then what we'll want to do is duplicate this 4 more times so that we have 5 pattern tiles. So I'm going to swipe to the left, select duplicate, and do this until I have 5 total tiles. And then what we're going to do is test this out. And then what we're going to do is test this out to see if the actual repeat works. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller so we can see what we're doing together. And just like what I showed you in that original kind of like, this is the mechanics of how a half drop works, we're basically going to do that same process. So I'm going to take this first layer and I'm going to tap on my transform tool and I'm going to drag it down until it's in one quadrant, in the lower left-hand quadrant. And then I'm going to tap on my layers again, go to the next tile, select my transform tool, and then I'm going to transform it so that it fits in the upper left-hand quadrant. And then I'm going to go into my third tile here, transform it. I'm going to have it go to the upper right-hand quadrant. And once I've done that, I'm going to drag it down so that it meets at the center. So I'm going to turn off these other layers so you can see what I'm talking about as I do that. So it was originally up here, but remember, we dropped it by a half. So what we'll need to do is bring this down to the center. And that's how you're creating that half drop repeat. And now let's go to the next layer. I'm going to turn that on, select my transform tool, drag it up to the upper right-hand quadrant. And then I'm going to turn off the middle one so you can see what I'm doing again. And this time I'm dragging it up so that it meets at the top half. And then you'll start to see all of the pieces are fitting together like a puzzle. So once I've done that, I'm going to turn on that middle quadrant. We can see that everything is matching up nicely. And then let's do this final transformation. I'm going to turn on this last tile, resize it down to the lower left-hand quadrant, and then just bring it over to the right and then bring it down. This is our final half drop repeat. What we can do now that we've tested it, is you could also just export that final file. So turn on your tile, select that layer, and then you can go to your actions menu, that little wrench icon, and then select share, and then you can share it as a PDF, a PSD, depending on what you need and what you're uploading. If you're uploading it to a print-on-demand site, you're going to want to select JPEG or a PNG, and then you can save that image. And then I'm going to save it to my files, and then I'm going to go into my surface pattern work file here, and then I'm going to hit save. And then I'm also going to export it as a PSD because I like to have editable files if I'm sending out file work for any type of licensing or any other kind of like freelance project. If people want to have the editable versions, they can. And what's nice is that even though you're working in Procreate, if they want the Procreate files, you can send them the Procreate files, but you can also export this as a PSD, which is like a Photoshop file, and you'll be able to open that up in Photoshop or in something like Affinity Photo. And then again, just save it to your file system. I have my surface pattern work file, and then hit save, and then it'll export it. So you'll want to make sure you export if you're saving as a PSD, it's going to export all of your layers here. And if you want to export for use in something like print on demand, you want to make sure you don't export your pattern test, but that you export your pattern tile itself. And that is it for my process on creating complex half drop repeating patterns right in the Procreate app. I hope you found the rundown of these tips helpful as you work on exploring creating surface pattern designs in the Procreate app. And if you like this tutorial, please consider giving this video a thumbs up, as that really helps me out. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and if you're not already, make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you can stay up to date on my latest tutorials and of course my course launches. If you're looking for other ways to connect with me, you can find me online at bellasophiacreative.com, and you can find all of my social media handles in the description box below. If you like tutorials like this and you're considering more in-depth creative classes, definitely check out my online courses over on learncreatedesign.com. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.